From Einmalines Productions, this is Singletrack, episode 299, presented by Electric Cable Car. Rock Candy Running's little backyard adventure races happened already a few weeks ago, but I had the chance to sit down with Team Run Run co-owner and coach Matt Urbanski and chat about the race, how it all went down, and what it means for me to be a race director. If you want to learn what LBA is all about, go visit littlebackyardadventure.com. The 12-hour event, which is a looped course running about 4 miles. Each loop was held for the first time, and the legends of LBA are Rob King for the men's race, running 19 loops or about 76 miles. In the women's race, Natalie Silver ran 16 loops or 64 miles, and in the non-binary category, Estella Hassertt ran 9 loops or 36 miles. Electric Cable Car is now powering all the results for our Rock Candy Running events. For full results of the 12 and 6-hour races, visit rockcandyrunning.com/results. We had live tracking of the 2 races on electriccablecar.com/live and are hoping to do this for all our events going forward. Stay tuned for info on that. All right, Matt Urbanski does need no introduction. My running coach, I'm sorry, Matt, co-founder of Team Run Run, knows a bit about running, racing, and coaching, but he doesn't know anything about race directing. So I'll let him ask the questions on this episode. One day I'll get Matt to come and run one of my races. All right, before we dive in, a while back, Nathan Sports sent me one of their Hyper Night Stealth jackets. And while it has a funny name, it's black, and it's called Hyper Night, so you'd think it wouldn't be a great fit for a night run, but it has some really cool camouflage reflective elements that will reflect at night. So it's actually a pretty good jacket to run at night. But what I love most about that jacket and why it has become my go-to layer is the material it's made out of. It's super lightweight and not crinkly and loud when running, but really sort of smooth. Does that make sense? These sort of windbreakers, light rain jackets used to make a lot of noise when moving, but this new material Nathan uses is super nice. The Hyper Night Stealth jacket has become my go-to layer when I need to run with that one extra layer on. It feels more movable and light than a long sleeve shirt and more protective too. It comes with a great hood, small little chest pocket, and at just $120, it's a great layer for those running days when you know you need that one extra layer. Visit nathansports.com to learn more, or click the link in the show notes or right here in your podcast player. See it? Yes, there's a link in there now. Thanks, Nathan, for outfitting my runs. And now, let's dive into the LBA recap show with Matt. This is a Team Run / Singletrack co-production podcast. I have Matt.
Rock Candy Racing.
Oh, yeah, / Rock Candy Running. Oh, my gosh. You know, like all the slashes. Matt, thanks for being back on the show. How is it going over there in Europe?
Fantastic. I'm getting ready to head to Milan in 2 weeks for the marathon. Life is
good. Nice. So you're still very much like full on road running mode, right?
Road running mode ends April 7th with the Milan Marathon, and then I shift to trails, getting ready for Western States. To be fair, though, I mean, I run on the trails 5 days a week. Okay. My main workouts are geared towards the roads and marathons, but I still do a lot on the trails. It's not like I'm going to go from all roads to all trail. It's just my fast stuff is on the roads.
So aren't you, if you say 5 days a week you're going to be on trails, aren't you then afraid that you're not fast enough? Like no. Your training isn't fast. Well, yeah, I know. You're always afraid to not be fast enough. But I mean, it's like, you see how I'm turning this conversation completely around. We were supposed to be talking about something.
Talking about a little backyard, yeah.
I know. Like, I don't know. I feel like that I need to run on roads right now because I'm running a road marathon, because that's where I'm fast. I feel like if I run trails, then I just get too slow.
Yeah, no, I mean, so like my Wednesday workout, I typically am doing on a paved bike path, and I'm running fast, and I'm wearing my Alpha Fly super shoes, and I love them. And then like on my weekend workout, like my long run workout, most weeks I'll do that on pavement, because it's like some sort of marathon workout. Mm-hmm. But some of the weekends where it's just sort of like a little more loose intensity workout, I'll go do that on the trails. And I'm still running hard, and like the speed might not be the same, but I can look at my heart rate and be like, yeah, I'm working still, and it's
Mhm.
good marathon training. But yeah, like I have this Saturday and next Saturday where I will be on the roads for those, like dialing in pace and heart rate and just kind of getting myself ready to do one more marathon. But I'll be ready to get to the trails. It's been I did a winter road season living in Boulder a couple years ago, and it was so snowy and cold. I was like, I can't wait to be done with this. It's been really nice here in Portugal, so it'll just be nice to have variety and to go do more trail racing. But it's been a great road season this year.
Nice. Well, and with your main focus being Western states, you're not worried. Like if your main focus would be hard rock, for example, perhaps you would adjust or no?
No, I mean, if I were doing hard rock and I raced a marathon April 7th, that would give me 3 months. That's plenty of time to get ready for
Hmm.
vert. I mean, I would
Hmm.
shift gears. I would go into mountain season very aerobically fit and feeling fast, and then I would just really I need to work on my downhill skills and like my trying to avoid getting injured, like rolling ankle. It's like getting that downhill strength. And just a little bit of uphill stuff. I would be fine with 3 months, and I would advise. I think most runners would be fine with that too. I think, yeah.
And where you live in Portugal, do you get enough mountains and bird and stuff around you? Do you feel like you're in a good place? You were just talking about Boulder, right? There you have the mountains, but then in the winter the mountains are closed.
Well, to be fair, lots of people in Boulder love to put on their spikes and go up in the ice and the snow. I was never into that, but people do it. Here, I don't have 3,000, 4,000 foot climbs,
Mhm.
but I've got a 1,500 foot climb I can do, and it's good. Like I mean, I can get the vert. It's not like I live in Houston.
Yeah,
It's there. I just can't get it. I have to like up down a lot more. But 1,500 feet's a pretty good climb.
yeah, yeah. And does it get too hot in the summer? What's the
I think if I go more interior into Portugal, yes, but where I live in Cascais, it's on the coast, so we've got this nice ocean breeze. I mean, it's like hot out in the sun, but like, it's not like running in Florida or something
I'm
like that.
desperately trying to find something that's bad about the place you live because I'm so jealous, right? I'm like,
You
isn't
won't
it?
mind. You
And
should
are
just
you
come for
sure
a
it
visit.
isn't? I know. I should. I should. I know.
Come run Madeira next May, and then you come over to the mainland, and we can hang out. And I'll show you the trails here.
I
Done.
like it. I like it. I like it.
All right, let's talk about little backyard.
Little backyard adventure, man. You know, the race that keeps on evolving and keeps on changing. In 2019, we did this race the first time with the focus on trying to make trail racing accessible. Um, the races in the Olympia area, they were all like, drive an hour on some dirt road into the middle of nowhere and run an ultra in February in like, sideways hail, right? And I wanted to bring trail races to the folks that run 5Ks and get a donut at the end, right? And so I organized it in August, summertime. I found a city park, fully accessible, shelter, bathroom, power, water, everything, which was made it perfect for me as a first-time race director. And then the city had these baseball fields, Little Baseball Association. That's what LBA Park stands for. And so
Okay.
we then came up with another word for that is abbreviated LBA, right?
LBA. Nice.
And that was sort of before even the whole like backyard ultra craze became popular, right? So
Yeah.
we had no idea. I think now I probably wouldn't call it backyard because I get several people emailing and asking if it's the
Yeah.
backyard ultra format. And I'm like, nope, I don't get an overnight permit. Can't be a backyard ultra, sadly. Anyway, so the city had these baseball fields, and behind there were a few acres of woods that are sort of connected to neighborhoods on all sides. The neighborhood had always used that as dog parks. They had, walked some trails through it, and that combination. So the city acquired these woods, prevented it from getting torn down and turned into, subdivision housing or whatever, right? And the combination of the city owning it now, but only recently, and the trails not being ADA accessible gravel paths, right? They're still being whiny single track, made it really fun to come up with a course. And it took me weeks of running every trail and trying to come up with a course, because it's then also like a fairly small area. I wanted to come up with as big of a mileage course. So I tried to aim for 4 miles at least, that would wind its way and never sort of double up on itself. I didn't want it to be arbitrary. I didn't want to be an out and back. I didn't want to be it to feel contrived, right? And so I ran it this way and that way and tried to connect this angle and that angle. And the city has since taken out a couple corners and added a couple trails that made it sort of allowed me to extend a little bit. So there's moving pieces in all of this, right? And so that's how the race started. And then initially we did 3 races. We had a 1 mile loop, a 3 mile loop, or 1 loop, 3 loop, and 5 loop race. So you could run 4 miles, or at that point it was just shy of 4 miles, right? And 11 and 18 or something like that, right? 3 point-ish, right? And it just was super successful right out of the gate, right? I mean, we didn't make bank. Race directors don't make bank, but we had like almost 150 people out there for a first year event, and everything was great, except timekeeping was awful, right? Because we had a 4 mile loop, runners coming through. Hey, I'm still going 1 mile more loop. Other runners finishing, other runners starting. And then on top of it, people, because it's neighborhood park, saying, oh, do you mind if I walk another loop? And do you mind if I don't do the full 3 loops, only do 2 loops? It just was really hard. And so we tried it a second time, and it was just as difficult. And then COVID made it more complicated. So we said we needed a new format. And that's how we ended at the 6 hour and the 12 hour format, where we're like, hey, come out and run as many loops as you want to. We count the loops, but we are not so super tight on like, oh, you did it in whatever, 45 minutes or 40 minutes or so.
But and I was looking at the numbers. You had like 42 and 46. You had a good turnout for me. And I don't have a ton of, I guess my gauge of like what's a good result of how many people show up for a local 6 and 12 hour event. I don't really know like what equals success, but you had a lot of finishers, and the winner, like, or the legend of LBA. I like, you didn't even call it like the winners. It's the legend. Rob ran 76 miles. That's a big run for a little park trail run for 12 hours. How has that grown? Like when you first went to the 6 and 12, this is the first year for 12 too, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like how is 2023 versus 2022? Like how's the evolution of the timed event going for you?
Yeah, so basically we did 2 years, with COVID interrupted, of the 1, 3, and 5. Then we switched to 6 hours. We did one in the summer, and then we did one in March last year, and then we added a 12-hour. And essentially, from last year, we doubled numbers, which it was really cool. And essentially, we had about the same amount of 6-hour runners, but we essentially added a whole double the numbers on the 12-hour, right? So people really like the 12-hour, which in some respects is a little tricky for me, because I love the idea of it being an accessible race, and I feel like I'm losing something there, because the 12-hour runners, they demand something then different than these first-time runners, and I want the little backyard adventure to still be this accessible race. But I also acknowledge that in early March, and again, you changed dates too, right? In early March, this now is becoming a perfect tune-up event for a lot of folks who are looking for an easy to get to, reasonably affordable, like, race that they can sort of schedule on their calendar in preparation for whatever they're doing. We had folks there that were preparing for an Action Backyard Ultra coming up in like 2 weeks later. We had some people coming out who were actually using it as a tune-up event for Cocodona. someone is doing it as a tune-up event for hard rock. And of course, LBA doesn't offer anything in terms of terrain makeup to mimic either Cocodona or hard rock, but it gives them time on feet. It is reasonably affordable. And, you have every 4 miles an aid station, so you can play your gear and drop bag, right? You can really sort of work on your race strategy. And I think for that, this event is going to only grow for that subset of people that is looking for that kind of tune-up experience
Yeah.
training event, right?
Yeah, when I was looking, I just looked at some of the top finishers because I was really impressed with the marks that they put up. And that's a lot of miles. And it's not a flat loop either. It's 200 feet roughly per mile or per loop. So
Mhm.
it's not flat. And to knock out that kind of mileage, I was like, who are these guys? And I saw one's Cascade Crest is on his ultra sign up. Another one had Badger coming up 2 weeks later. This is on his calendar. Yeah, there were some big, yeah, it looked like a really good tune-up race for a lot of people. But then this almost seems interesting. Like, the 6 hour people, you're saying this is an accessible race. How many beginners go out for a 6 hour event? I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just like, make that fit for me. Because a lot of beginners don't think, oh yeah, I'm going to go do 6 hours.
I think this is a marketing challenge.
Okay.
And I agree. So it is not, 6 hours is not, but you don't have to run the full 6 hours, right? I mean, we don't consider anything to be a DNF. So if you finish after 2 hours, if you run the first time a trail half marathon out there, or if you get your first 20 miler or your first 4 hours, right, then we celebrate it and you have sort of that achievement. So I did not capture everyone's story, but there are so many people who PR'd for themselves out there
Right.
because a 4 mile loop is reasonably accessible. You can say, especially if you have time, hey, I'll go out one more loop, right? And so I think a lot of people found it to be a very accessible way of stretching themselves. So yes, it's not your beginner 5K anymore, sadly, in some respects, right? I mean, I don't know. Perhaps there's a part where at some point we have to go to a 2 day event and sort of do the 5K on Sunday or something like that because the course is already marked. Because I still would like to preserve that, right? But um, giving people these options of sort of building their own race and saying, what are you out here for? Do you need a safe environment to run your first ultra? Do you want to do 4 hours on trail, right? I mean, there's so many different variables of what you can go out and challenge yourself for. And LBA is sort of, aside from the point that you don't want to go drive yourself crazy and doing loops,
Yeah.
because it is a 4 mile loop and it's a very twisty loop. I think there is something a little bit like insanity inducing out there. But beyond that, I think it's a perfect environment to sort of challenge yourself. And you don't race against others. You really race for yourself, not even against yourself. You race for yourself, right? You are out there to say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do one more loop, and stuff, right? And we have an aid station at the finish that's fully stocked, and people can recharge. The parking lot is like 50 feet from there. People can go to their car and sleep for half an hour and then head back out if they want to, right? It's possible.
Were there some good stories? Are there any stories that you can share? Obviously, you don't have to give names, but like, were there any like new PRs first for people, things that you were able to celebrate there, where you actually like maybe knew someone's story? I don't know. What are some of the stories that came out of this? I'm interested.
I mean, a couple stories I think really stand out. Like Natalie, our winner of the women's race, our legend, she had never run 100K before, and she challenged herself, and she came up from Southern Oregon or so, and she chose that race to run that full distance, and that was super fun to see. And then Dale is his name, if I remember correctly. He is an older gentleman who ran his 185th ultra at LBA this past weekend. So he he hated on himself, and I felt, because he's an older gentleman, he shuffled along on these trails, and he's like, I used to be faster, I can't stand how slow I am. And I'm like, dude, you're running, you're out there, you're moving, you are pushing yourself, you're getting to an ultra distance. You're not just coming out and saying, okay, well, I want to be part of this, but I really can't do this anymore. I mean, he was incredible. And to so to be part of these stories is super, super fun. And I say it all the time. Race directing is insanely exhausting, and it's hard to not like this more than running itself. If I wouldn't like the running for the traveling and for being up on mountaintops and for the personal health and stuff, I would just do race directing. It's so much fun watching these runners come to the finish line and tell their stories and
And
connect.
it seems almost equally exhausting, if not more.
Oh yeah.
I don't envy race directors. I run lots of races, but I have no desire to direct a race. It just seems like, I mean, when you run your own ultra, yes, there are lots of problems that can happen, and you can solve them, right? That's part of the game when you do ultras. But man, the problems that you might have to deal with all the different moving pieces, and how were the logistics like? I mean, you've got this down. It's not your first year in this part. You've got one aid station. You've got, let's call it 90 people out running the loop. I don't know what are the worries you have as a race director? You know, we can edit this out if you don't talk about like.
Well,
What are the things that worry you when you do a race like this? Because I would be anxious for you, for like, oh gosh, what could go wrong?
I mean, really, the only worry is that a runner gets hurt. That's really the only worry, right? We've got some medical staff there, but there is a certain level of hurt, right? When it sort of goes next level, where you sort of have to be like all hands on deck and like, shit, man, right? And again, LBA is like 10 minutes from a hospital, right? I mean, we could literally throw some in the back of a car and race them over to the hospital if need be, right? But I mean, that's sort of the main worry. That sort of never really goes away, right? Because that can happen. You can prepare for every possible eventuality. You can have this thing just as dialed as perfectly as you can possibly have an event dial. That is sort of the ultimate worry. And I mean, I guess, right? I mean, we're parents. We know how it is, right? We want our kids to become independent and go off to school by themselves and feel safe, but the worry never leaves, right? I mean, when they are out there, you feel for them, you're thinking of them. And so there's probably a similar comparison where you sort of have to let that go. But taking it back, I think the beauty of race directing is, if you like, for me, I like telling stories. And for me, building a race is being a storyteller. Everything from finding a course and spending weeks on marking this course, and then having this white slate on the map where you're like, I get to name this. I get to design the bib. I get to design the logo. I get to choose how I want to talk about this event. I get to set this up. I get to talk to lots of people, everything from permit agencies to insurance companies to actual runners, right? To sponsors, right? I get to tell them the story of why they should be part of this event. And I absolutely love doing that. And I love doing this so much that if I wouldn't run myself and my family ragged in doing these events, I could literally do an event like this every 2 weeks, just because of the storytelling is so fun, right? This sort of storytelling in air quotes, right? Where you sort of put all of these pieces together. Like I'm running out of bibs. Bought a big stack of Rock Candy running bibs, and I get to design new bibs, right? And it's like, it's so exciting to like sort of open Photoshop up again and say, what do I want my bibs to look like for the next season, right? It's so cool. I love these sort of creative pieces, right? And then from that, it's not a one-time thing, right? Once you establish a race, people connect to these stories, and they tell their own stories by experiencing these races, and that allows you to build on that you then bring in more people, bringing people back. People have different experiences the following year. The weather is different. You listen to the requests and add certain features or something, right? So you let other people sort of add to that story, and before you know it, it becomes a book, it becomes a saga, right? I mean, I know that LBA is nothing compared to Western States, but Western States is a story, right? It's a huge historical event that's on the calendar every year, right? And thousands of people connect to that story, and to build something like that, even if it's tiny, LBA is tiny compared to it, it's sort of exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's super cool. No, okay, I'm not sold on becoming a race director myself, but I can appreciate a little bit more the joy that you get from it. I'm glad that you still run yourself. I think that it's like not that you can't be a race director and a runner yourself, but there's probably a way that you can continue to sort of like really connect with the runner and know, like, design the story in a way that like will continue to connect with your audience. And so I think it's cool that you're still racing. I've seen pictures. I have not run any of your events yet. I should. Maybe I'll the next time we're in Washington, if I can line one up, I'll do it.
Yes.
I've seen pictures of you at these events though. You have like a bullhorn. I feel like I've seen you, like, you just look like you're in your element when you're like on a table talking or like out there. I don't know. It just seems like you love doing it, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It is actually not easy for me because I'm not a big showman. Like, I would be fine. I feel like it's important for me to be out in the front, and it's super important for me to connect with these runners and make them feel welcome and be sort of that host. But I don't see myself as sort of be this guy that has to hog the microphone at every single time. So it actually takes a lot of effort for me, especially because it's something that I created myself, right? And I don't have a hard time doing my own horn in that regard, even though I have a podcast. But I'm not somebody who loves that part of it. I feel like if um if I would find somebody who would be tremendously good and I would totally trust, I would let them take that piece. Um, but to your point, I am a runner too. I run races. I know how important that is. I know I've been to races where nobody really gives a crap, right? Where nobody welcomes runners back, where nobody, sort of takes ownership. And so I think the hosting piece is super important to me. I want to be that face that as runners come in, especially after 6 hours, 12 hours out there, right? And they sort of start to be like, right? That if they make eye contact with me, that I'm 100% there for them. That's super important for me. They need to feel safe. They need to feel like they're not inconveniencing me. They need to feel like they can ask any questions, right? They need to feel fully supported. And that's super important because we all experienced that at races, right? We all experienced that person who deeply cares in the moment about you, even though there are hundreds of people and they have to do this dozens of times, that if somebody takes the flasks and fills it for you, if somebody does that extra little step, how in that moment means the world, because they don't have to do that. They could just be like, here's the aid station, just see what you like and you're out, right? I think that's super, super important. And that's why I do it. I don't really need to be Mr. Bullhorn, right?
Now maybe I'll summarize it as like, it's a race that's got some soul to it. Like, I picture some of the other races. I mean, I've run hundreds of races in my life since I was a kid, and I can remember certain ones where like David Horton standing at the end, ready to give me a hug. Like, I remember that. And he like knew every runner. So as I'm coming in, he's like, "You ran faster than I thought you would." I was like,
Nice.
"Thanks, David."
Yeah.
or like like an Air Viper race where Nick Curry's mom, Patty, she's like, you tell me what stuff you want to have at that aid station. I'll make sure we take care of you.
Hmm.
It's like, thank you, Patty.
Hmm. Exactly.
It's that kind of stuff, that sort of feeling where you're like, yes, I'm part of this. This is a cool thing. It's not just some sort of like machine company that's like cogs and gears running, making this thing happen. There's someone here with some soul. Um, and it's cool that you're building that. And it's a creative act, which is awesome, and it's a really good thing for runners. And as the sport continues to grow, like more and more races come up, there are more and more options for people, and I think that the races that you're building are the types of things that will make it because of the personal touches that you add to it. I even saw, I think your wife made the awards. I think Trixie made the awards, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I don't know. I like all the little pieces, the finishing touches you put on it, and yeah, people should go do your race, including myself.
Well, there we go. I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, there are lots of different races out there, and there are lots of different formats. And again, it comes back to that storytelling that I think we have in a we are sort of in a growing market right now. People have more interest in races sell out. So and yeah, more and more people are interested in trail running, and I think that gives you a little bit of a creative playground to say, how do you want these races to be? How do you want the experience to be? Do you like? I don't do age group awards. I feel like I have too many. I don't have enough runners for it to make sense in some respects, right? But I also feel like there are ways of how you can redefine what the racing experience is like. Yeah, and some people are going to expect a free t-shirt, or there's always people signing up and sort of expecting something that they consider to be the status quo. And you need to be prepared for that, and you need to again have a story of why you do certain things and why you don't do certain things, right? And for us, I just like um sort of to use this from a business building point of view, and not just say, what's the checkboxes, what do I need to fill out in order to make this thing run, but to more look at it from like, what's the experience that I want to have, what's the unique piece that I want to surround myself. And one of the challenges is that as a dreamer, every event every year, in order to be the most engaged, you feel like you constantly have to add something new and reinvent it. And that's a super tricky thing, because if you're already 100% maxed out, and then that afterglow of like these couple weeks after the race, you're like sitting around and you're like, and for next year, we are going to do, right? And then you're like, well, we already were maxed out this year. Who is going to do it? I can only do, like, I was trying to do live tracking for this year, and it was so damn hard to keep up, right? And it did force me a little bit more to sit on a computer during the event as opposed to being out there and connecting with runners, right? And it was sort of a trade-off that I made, and I don't know if I want to keep doing it in that way. I need somebody who can do this for me. I can't be the one who is constantly in front of the computer, right?
No, but I get it. Like as we try to grow Team and Run, for example, like we try all sorts of different ways that we're trying to connect more runners with coaches. And it's like, oh, that one kind of worked, but that was a lot of work and didn't produce a whole lot. This thing we tried was amazing, and we're going to keep doing that. And you were doing a 6 hour, and now you added a 12 hour. You said overnight permits aren't easy, but does that mean you're going to do a 24 hour next, or what's I'm joking. I won't hold you to what the next iteration will be.
No. But I think an easy way to grow it is to offer 2 different 6 hour blocks. There's several races are doing that, right? Because it didn't really make sense to have the 6 hour runners start an hour later. We could have had everyone start at the same time, and then you would have another 6 hour block starting at the second 6 hours. And I think there would be an easy way of sort of adding more runners and another racing experience, right? Somebody who might travel from further away, they might appreciate not having to start a race at 6, but at noon, right? And so I'm thinking about that being an easy way of like adding more runs, because the 24 hours, I just think with the city permits is going to be really, really hard. I'm already stretching them, and I have a good relationship. We we pay our permits, but we also we live very little garbage, and we don't really abuse the facilities. And so the city loves us, but there's certain limitations where you just run into laws that the city sets up for themselves, right? And
And the 24 hours is just another beast. You don't want to go there. Don't go.
I mean, I just, I love the idea, because especially in a safe environment like a city park, there is something truly magical about that night running and giving people the experience, right? Because if you would have a night permit, you could then also start a 12-hour block at 6 in the evening or something and give people only the option of running at night, right? And so I'm not opposed to that, but I also have to be kind to my volunteers, and I can't stretch them into foreverness, right? We moved it to March, and this year, while it wasn't raining hard, we moved everything into the shelter, which previously we had things outside, but the wind was so strong that it was really, really cold in the afternoon. And I need to be kind to my volunteers.
Good. That's good. Well, yes, you gotta love the volunteers and treat them well. I agree. So what else? Make sure we get the details, right? It's March race, 12 hours, 4-mile loops, 200 feet gain per loop roughly, and
super really twisty. See, I think this.
I looked at the Strava map. It looks. It's all over, but it's not like you're doing lots of repeats or loop.
No, absolutely. I think if you run it, it feels like it flows really well. There are a couple things. If you would go out there and try to run that course or anything, you would probably get really frustrated, because unmarked, there's so many weird little boot paths and one shoots that go out into the neighborhood, right, that you have to backtrack on, right? It feels a little frustrating trying to go run out there by yourself if you don't know the loops, right? And so I created this loop that flows really well, to the point that I think a runner who doesn't know the park doesn't even realize what they're running, right? Because there are some very almost contrived, weird added loops. But the other thing is that it does feel really twisty. So you never get into this here I can just go for 3/4 of a mile, right? You constantly have to turn and twist, right? So for somebody, and many sections are really single track too. So it's a good one to work on your footwork.
And as you said earlier, it's a good early season race for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them. Just getting your single track trail legs on and being ready to. It seems like a great fit, man. I like what you're doing,
and it's in the city, so I think outside of crazy weather events, right? Way Too Cool had to be canceled 2 weeks prior or something like that, right? And I know that this sort of old school ultra running has always been about if you beard this long enough, then you can handle any weather in the early season, and that what makes you really tough and awesome. And there's a component it's true though.
I know. I got to get my beard game going.
Well, for Western states, you just need the mustache and the 2-inch split shorts.
And a hat. Yeah.
An owl and a bucket hat. Get your bucket hat. Anyway, no, for somebody who wants to prepare for and plan, this is a race that I can't really foresee why we would ever have to cancel it, right? So as you're planning your early season calendar, this is a safe one to get to. Yeah, I mean, it is early March. We could have potentially have snow, but even then, right? I mean, it's the city. It's low, close to sea level. So we are not up in the mountains where we are putting volunteers potentially in danger for having to sit out at an aid station remote for 12 hours, right? So it's a really safe bet to put on your calendar as a runner because it's going to happen, right? And just from an overall planning point of view, right? I mean, you've got a drop bag every 4 miles. Like when we ran the first couple events right after COVID, people like brought their own camping chairs and their own coolers, and they sort of spread out and they took care of themselves, right? There was a time when we were still very skittish about sharing aid station food and stuff, right? And so people have all forgotten that. They're like, oh yeah, M&Ms, we're back to that, right? A few years
Yeah.
ago we were all sitting around, it's like, we will never get back to the feeling comfortable around it. I'm like, yeah, right. Uh,
The community chip bowl, yeah.
Yes, we're back, baby. The community chip bowl is
Give me
back.
some Oreos, yeah.
So anyway, um, yeah, it's logistically, it's a really good race, and I mean, it's also I think really fun from a camaraderie, right? Because you never really, I mean, I don't know how many runners I can fit on this thing before it would feel really overcrowded because it feels crowded at the start finish eight station area as runners come through, but once you're like out on this 4 mile loop, right? I mean, yeah, if you're fast or really slow, you overtaken a few times, right? I mean, that happens, but it's actually a nice thing. Often in trail races, you're sort of like, sometimes for seemingly hours by yourself, right? Which some people appreciate too, but this race, you will see a lot of runners looping in and around you all the time, right?
Might get some little bits alone, but you're going to see people. It's not like you're
Yeah,
running through the night and you see 3 people over 8 hours. Yeah.
yeah, correct, exactly. Yeah, I
Sounds
mean,
good to me, man. I
yeah,
like what you're doing.
well, volunteer is or like support crew and stuff is easy to get to. They can show up. I mean, we have parents come out with their kids and one person runs and there's a playground right next to the shelter and the kids play at the playground and while the parent runs a few hours and a few loops around the woods and every 45 minutes they get to high five their kids and see them and stuff like that, right? So it's yeah, in that regard, it's a really cool event, and I mean, it's so exhausting. The as a race director, I mean, I still have boxes in my office. They are now all nicely tucked away and sort of cleaned up and everything, right? But like, I don't know if you saw the picture. So I take all the signage off, but it's wet. It's March, right? So I mean, I can't just like put it in a box and put it in storage. I mean, everything would
Yeah.
mold and rot. They are all like laminated signs that I want to reuse over and over and over again. So for like 3 days in the office, I have like yellow directional arrows all over the office floor, drying out to make sure I can safely put them away, right?
The life of the race
I
director. I
mean,
love it.
it is a little bit. I don't have a lot of space. I don't pay for a storage unit. I don't have a giant garage that I utilize for this. And so everything gets like really tight too, like make sure that everything sort of fits. And so for the weeks leading up to the race, everything gets like stacked and stacked. And all of a sudden, like sponsors send stuff and all of a sudden have a giant box in the office with some stuff that you're handing out and stuff, right? And so the anticipation builds leading up to the event, and then you need to open all your boxes and see what you need, and stuff that you don't need like ends up in the office strewn about, and after the race you sort of reverse all of this, you pull it all back together, right?
And now you're in the, as we were talking about before we were recording, you're in the recovery phase. You can just like relax a little bit. And then you can start thinking about the next one later this year.
So, so I learned an important lesson, right? You don't want to make any announcements or you make any big decisions in that afterglow, right? I mean, that's the same danger with like signing up for a race, 2 days after you've just completed a race, which,
Yep.
you as a coach, you might say, that's exactly when you need to sign up. But as a race director, I want to be very careful in making these sort of announcements. Um, um, because I mean, as I said, I mean, people love achieving something for themselves out there and they have a great time. And so you just feel really, you don't just feel exhausted, you also feel really, um, it feels rewarding being able to put something on like that you really put everything on the line for, that is not just for yourself, right? That is for other people. And then in the aftermath, right, people email you and they say how much they loved it and they share their photos and stuff, right? And so you in this glow of like, wow, can I do this right over again? And then you realize how exhausted you are. But it is super fun. So yes, I mean, we're already, I mean, we haven't talked about the other important piece that is the whole communication to runners beforehand, throughout, and afterwards, right? And how important that piece is too, right? You're not
Yeah.
just somebody who has to do the practical pieces, making sure you have enough watermelon and all the directional signs are in the right place, right? There's sort of a complete hands-on approach, but beyond that, it's super important that you find a way of translating the whole communication um, about the event and making sure that runners have all the information that they need. Make sure you respond to emails in a timely manner if they have questions and stuff, right? And then take these questions always into consideration of like, oh, perhaps I need to add it to the general communication to runners and stuff. That's also a hugely important piece, right?
So race directing is not just the day of, is basically what you're
Mm.
saying. Like,
The day off, it's orchestrating, right? The day off, all the pieces are in play, and you just stand there and hope that everything sings together, right? Um, it's the weeks beforehand and afterwards which are the crucial pieces, right? Like how
and
fast.
you have to imagine, to go with the symphony analogy, like that symphony didn't just show up one day and perform the symphony. They probably had a lot of rehearsals and a lot of
ex,
time went into
ex,
that one event to try and do it well. So
exactly, exactly. That's sort of the piece. Yes,
well,
that's the race directing in a nutshell.
keep doing it.
I
I
mean,
love the stories that are coming out of it, and people love it. That's the thing. Like you get fulfillment out of it, people love it, and they like. I'm always talking to people as a coach and just as someone who's been a lifelong runner about like all the analogies between running and life, and like you see it all there. Like you're gonna see people like challenge themselves, achieve things, grow as a person, and you're like creating the canvas for these people to have these experiences, which that's the good stuff in life. I like as a dad, I'm always talking about like trying to provide my kids with experiences rather than just things. And like you're doing that for people. And that's good stuff, man. Keep doing it.
thank you. It is interesting also to approach racing more from a creating opportunities point of view and less from a competition point of view, because I'm not a very competitive guy in that regard. I don't, and I think, my races and the way I'm sort of putting them out speak to that. Like, I don't really just celebrate or care about the front runners. It's not just about you being better than your opponent or whatever. So for me, races, even though they are by nature built around competition, they are really, for me, they're really about enabling people to give them this adventure. There is sort of some school of thought that says, well, trail racing is that part of sort of the outdoor world that feels very foreign to the classic John Muir outdoor experience person, right? Because in many ways, you go to the outdoors to get away from people, to be alone, to gain skills that you acquire for yourself where you don't need other people, right? And races is very opposite. You actually bring people together. You want people to be all on the same trail. You allow people to cheat in their navigation skills by putting up directional arrows, giving them a bib, and you even feeding them, right? You're not even required, right? So it's very opposite of the classic old school explorer mentality, right? And there's some people who don't really see trail racing as a true outdoor experience or sport, right? But when you look at it from this place of allowing people who otherwise wouldn't be able to give this experience, you're making the outdoors more accessible to them. Not everybody is good with navigational skills. Not everybody enjoys being alone in the woods and feels safe. Not everybody has the time to work on a detailed nutrition plan and think about every possible scenario through, right? And if we can take people and give them these adventures, yeah, sure, they're not as cool as climbing El Capitan solo by yourself, right? I mean, yeah, there's a spectrum of how much this is an adventure. That's why it's just a little adventure in your backyard, right? I mean, there is something about that.
But I don't even think you should put them on that spectrum where like one is more outdoorsy or more adventurous or more awesome than the other. Like someone trying to run their first 4 hours and you giving them like a good situation for them to have that experience, like that's no less like valuable to that person than someone who is interested in climbing up cap, right? Like it's not. I wouldn't even like try and stack them up that way. Like it's everyone's got their own experiences they want, and the John Muir Wilderness experience is not necessarily any more like better than running in the backyard. Like
Yeah.
that's where you find the fulfillment and where like your journey's at as a person. So I wouldn't
No,
even like I wouldn't judge it that way.
it isn't, right? I'm bringing it up because I live in the Pacific Northwest, and over here there are a lot of people who wish the wilderness and the outdoors would be preserved only for the people. It's sort of a little gatekeepy thing, right? They want it to be only for the people who can hack it themselves, right? They don't need any help and guide, right? They might need, $5,000 of gear, but they don't need anything else, right? And I think for me, race directing is about enabling people to have these experiences. That's sort of my focus, and that's why I focus and favor the individual moments and not so much, the trophies and podiums, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there are all these different experiences that people want, right? Like, if you want to go win a race where the competition is the thing, those races exist. If you want
Exactly.
to go race a race that's not marked, that is crazy out, where you're on your own and you have to carry everything, those exist. Um, you're filling a niche that has lots of people that will benefit from what you're doing. So, yeah, it's like when people try and compare different types of races, like a road marathon to a trail race, or like 100 miler to a 50K. It's like it depends what you want out of it. Like
Yeah.
they're all valuable. Like you had Chad Lassiter on your podcast a while back, and that guy does everything. And that guy's gonna say, I love that one, I love that one, I love that one, all for different reasons, but they all add something to his life and his running experience. So like there's a place for all of them, and I don't think one's better than another. It's maybe one's better for one person at a different time of their life, but they're not inherently better. So I
Yeah.
think what you're building is cool. I
Yeah.
like it.
Thank you. So now we just need to get you to come out and do one of those.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know it's
yeah.
if timing wouldn't be an issue, would it be? I mean, Saturnalia is really just a 10K. It would be hard to make that, even though, I mean, pre-holiday would perhaps be fun. But would it be 12 hours at LBA or would it be Beast of Big Creek?
I, I don't know, man. I might be the 6 hour LBA. 12 hours is brutal, man. That's a hard, like if you're trying to run 12 hours and you're trying to run it and run the whole thing, like that's a hard ask. And I'd need to recover for a while from that. 6 hours, maybe it'd be a good long run, it'd be fun. And then the beast, man, you're getting into sky running stuff there, and like I can run a long time, but like that's steep, up, down, that stuff's hard. So, and how about this? I'm going to be in Seattle over the summer. Let's just go for a run.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't need a race. Let's go for a run.
I like it.
Yeah.
No, if you're
Or Olympia, the Northwest.
yes. If you're in the area, we'll definitely go out for a run. We'll find something good.
We got 2 weeks this summer. We're going to be out before Western States. So
Nice. Cool.
We'll hit you up. You show me the good trails. I've never run in the Olympia area, so you'll have to show me around.
Well, we'll make it worthwhile. See what the season looks like. Okay, I think I've got the lawnmowers now starting to hum in my neighborhood here. I think we need to sort of wind down this podcast. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show and letting me blah all over this. This was LBA.
It's fantastic. Yeah, talk about LBA. You got to celebrate these things. They're great events you're putting on, great stories you're helping to tell. I 100% support what you're doing, man. Keep it going.
Thanks, Matt, for letting me sit back and take a bit of a deep dive into this race directing stuff. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us. Hope you come out and race LBA sometime. And thank you, Nathan, for supporting Singletrack. This is Singletrack, and I see you over at Electric Cable Car for daily trail and mountain news. I'm your host, Matthias Eichler, saying Auf Wiedersehen und Tschüss.